Hey guys, tonight we are going to slip into a world that drips instead of ticks. A world where time flows not with the sharp click of gears, but with the gentlest of drops. You find yourself in the vast desert of ancient Persia. The day's heat has finally loosened its grip, and the night air is cool, almost sweet, brushing over your skin with that hush you only hear in wide open spaces. The stars above blaze so fiercely they look like golden nails hammered into velvet. For a moment, you think they might even hum if you listen hard enough. There's no buzz of a smartphone here, no glowing microwave clock, no neon numbers nagging you to be more efficient. Just sand shifting under the breeze and, now and then, the clink of a clay vessel. And this, right here in the desert night, is where the first Persian water clocks quietly take shape. Simple bowls floating on water, sinking at their own pace, measuring time with nothing more than patience. It's oddly soothing, but let's be honest, you probably wouldn't last long here without Wi-Fi or a bottle of cold, sparkling water. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're still awake enough, drop a comment with your location and the local time where you're listening from. It's fun to see the little constellation of sleepy time zones we're building. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You crouch in the sand, knees brushing the grit, and before you rests a bowl no bigger than your palm. The Persians call it a fenjan. It looks laughably plain, just a clay dish with a pinprick hole at the bottom, but it carries the weight of centuries. You set it carefully on the surface of a larger jar filled with water. The bowl floats for a moment, cocky as a little boat, then slowly fills, wobbling as droplets slip through that tiny hole. At last it surrenders, dipping below the surface with a whisper. That's sinking. That's 1 unit of time gone by. Nothing dramatic. No alarms, no bells. Just the sound of water, soft as breath. The mainstream historical fact is simple enough. Persians used such bowls as early as the 4th century BCE to regulate ceremonies, mark night watches, and time astronomical observations. Imagine a priest in a Zoroastrian temple muttering prayers by the flame, checking a bowl to know when the next chant must begin. Or a soldier on guard duty, watching his little fenjon sink and knowing relief is coming once the water swallows it whole. The grand sweep of empires, temples, and armies once bent to the fate of a hole no wider than a bristle. Of course, not everyone agreed on how it all began. Historians still argue whether the Persians invented these clocks independently or borrowed the idea from their Babylonian neighbors. The Babylonians, with their scribes and their celestial obsessions, had been tinkering with time for ages. But the Persians? They gave the invention a personality, weaving it into daily life until the drip and the star seemed like kin. And here's a quirky tidbit to make you smirk. Some early experimenters apparently thought olive oil might flow more steadily than water. Imagine kneeling in the sand, trying to time your prayers with a fenjon full of oil, and praying extra hard that nobody knocks it over and deep fries history's schedule. It's brilliant and ridiculous at the same time. You can almost hear the muttered complaints. Great, now the hours smell like salad. The night grows deeper and you lean closer. You can hear the hollow plink as each drop escapes through the hole, ricocheting softly in the jar below. Somewhere in the shadows, a priest rubs his eyes and stifles a yawn, trying not to nod off. After all, keeping divine hours is important business, even if the gods don't send reminder emails. You, however, are allowed to yawn. You're allowed to let your shoulders sag and your eyelids dip while the bowl fills. You glance again at the sky, the lion prowling overhead, the bull lowering its gilded horns, the twins holding hands across eternity. To the Persian mind, these constellations weren't just pretty, they were calendars, signposts, cosmic compasses. And the finjan? It became the bridge, grounding heaven's drama into something human hands could count. Drop by drop, bowl by bowl, the immeasurable was made measurable. You feel the connection. The stars above, the water below, both whispering the same song of patience. A joke to lighten the mood. If your modern productivity app worked like a Fenjon, it would be called Eventually. Another, the setup instructions would be just 2 words: add water. And the premium version? It would come with a cat that occasionally swats the bowl, teaching you the philosophical lesson of uncertainty. Even in antiquity, cats were probably already meddling with humanity's best ideas. The desert wind sighs, sending a ripple across the jar, and the Fenjon trembles on the surface like a tightrope walker. You steady your breath as though you might disrupt it just by exhaling too loudly. And then, with quiet grace, the bowl tips under. Another hour has dissolved, or at least another slice of it, and you feel it echo in your chest like a heartbeat stretched across eternity. The Persians didn't need white noise apps or mindfulness timers. They had dripping water and infinite silence. They had the humility to measure their lives, not by ticking machines, but by how long it took a humble clay bowl to sink. And you, crouched here among the stars and sand, find yourself oddly comforted by the same rhythm. One bowl sinks, another will follow, the stars will turn, and you rest thinking, thousands of years ago, someone else was also listening, also waiting, also drifting toward sleep as time slipped away, drop by drop. The sand still clings to your knees as you shuffle closer to the firelit workshop. Inside, the air is warm and heavy with the scent of clay. You watch the craftsman's hands, broad, sure, calloused, working the earth as though coaxing it to reveal its secrets. He kneads and coils with steady patience, pressing out air bubbles, rolling the lumps until the clay sighs into smoothness. To you, it looks like dough, but his focus is different. He isn't feeding bellies, he's feeding hours. He turns the lump on a low wheel, coaxing symmetry. The bowl rises, edges trimmed neat, sides thin to the thickness of a melon rind. Clay has moods, he might say, and tonight it seems agreeable. Too dry and it cracks, too wet and it collapses in his hands. You realize the rhythm of the potter's wheel is as steady as the Fenjon itself. Spin, press, lift, spin, press, lift. If time drips, clay hums. The mainstream historical fact here is that Persian potters were already masters of their craft by the first millennium BCE. They made not only bowls for eating and jars for storing, but specialized vessels designed for tasks like filtration, incense, and yes, even timekeeping. Their skill was so refined that the bowls used as Fenjon could be burnished smooth enough inside that water slipped away clean, without clinging in unpredictable streaks. The potter lifts the soft bowl carefully, setting it aside to firm up. Later, it will be fired in a kiln until it sings when tapped, a clear note like a bell. You imagine him rapping it with his knuckle, listening as if the clay could talk back. Yes, I'm ready to keep your hours. Now comes the bravest act, the piercing of the hole. At first, a thorn suffices. Later, a bronze pin. Eventually, an iron awl twisted with just enough force to carve through the damp clay. The channel must be straight, neat, uncompromising. Too rough and water will wobble. Too glazed and the flow will stutter. You watch the craftsman lean close, tongue between his teeth, as though a tiny engineer inside the clay is holding a ruler and shouting directions. Just a hair to the left. People call this a simple clock, but you can feel the centuries of trial and error baked into its rim. The potter knows what generations of potters before him also knew. Time doesn't forgive sloppy work. If the pinhole is wrong, hours dissolve into chaos. If the glaze clings unevenly, prayers start late. Guards swap too early. Bakers burn bread. The world's order, in its quiet way, depends on his steady hand. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some craftsmen sign their bowls with faint marks on the base. Not proud signatures like you'd see on royal inscriptions, but tiny scratches, symbols, or initials, hidden where only another potter would know to look. Imagine discovering one under layers of glaze centuries later, realizing a man with sore shoulders and dusty fingernails quietly left his name inside the machinery of time. Historians still argue whether these potters thought of themselves as artisans of time or just as general craftsworkers producing yet another vessel. Did they know they were making history's heartbeat, or was it just another commission from a temple or market? Some scholars insist the specialization shows intent. Others suggest it was all routine, just bowls with holes among bowls without. Either way, you can sense the weight of responsibility pressing into each thumbprint. The kiln's glow fills the workshop now. Flames lick the dome, throwing long shadows that make the racks of bowls look like a silent choir waiting to sing. The craftsman slides his new fenjon into the heat. You picture it hardening, pores shrinking, its body transforming from pliant mud to disciplined clay. When it emerges, it will no longer be fragile. It will be a vessel with a purpose. A light joke surfaces. Imagine the potter explaining his job at a party. I make bowls with holes in them. Not exactly resume material, another. What if he had to offer a refund policy? Your prayers ran too fast? Sorry, no returns. And finally, you grin at the thought of a potter's guild debating hole sizes like modern tech bros arguing app features. Mine drains faster. Mine resists bubbles. You lean closer and trace a finger along a finished fenjon. The rim is smooth, the body perfectly balanced. You sense not only craftsmanship but devotion. Each curve, each scrape, each burnish is an act of quiet stubbornness against chaos. And in the hush of the workshop, with the kiln whispering and the wheel stilled, you realize you're not just watching clay being shaped. You're watching time itself take form, patient, modest, and ready to drip into eternity. The workshop quiet fades behind you as you follow the keeper into a courtyard where the night feels heavier, like it's holding its breath. A jar taller than your waist stands in the middle, its neck scored with faint lines carved by a nail. The keeper kneels beside it, dipping his hand into cool water, and you realize you're about to see the ritual of calibration. Time's rehearsal before the real performance. He sets the fenjon on the surface of the water, watching it bob like a smug little boat. Then, with a flick of his fingers, he opens a small channel at the jar's base. Water begins to drain into a basin below, trickling with a steady hiss. Now there are two systems working at once. The sinking bowl, slipping into silence, and the falling waterline, creeping past carved marks. Two clocks measuring the same unseen current, each whispering their verdicts. The mainstream historical fact is clear. Both inflow and outflow clepsydras were used across the Iranian world. Inflow bowls like the fenjon measured hours by sinking, while outflow jars measured time by the lowering of water past etched lines. Together, they created redundancies and checks, ensuring that ritual timings, irrigation shares, or guard rotations were fair. Imagine the relief of a tired soldier knowing both bowl and jar agreed it was finally time to hand over his spear. The keeper squints, comparing the sinking of the bowl against the descent of water. 12 bowls, he notes, reach the second scratch. Yesterday, he mutters, it was 12 and a half. So he adjusts. Perhaps he scrapes the pinhole ever so slightly wider, or warms the jar with his palm so the water flows more eagerly, or adds a cup of cooler water from an amphora nearby. It's all meticulous fussing, but fussing that keeps prayers aligned with stars and fields aligned with fairness. Here's a quirky tidbit. In some irrigation councils, elders carried both a bowl and a marked stick to meetings. The stick showed how many bowls had sunk during a session. If the meeting dragged too long, everyone knew it wasn't just because of long-winded speeches. The bowls tattled on them. Imagine the embarrassment. The fenjon says you've been boring us for 3 units too many. Historians still argue whether the inflow bowls actually predated the outflow jars, or if both evolved side by side in different regions. Were they born as cousins, or did one inspire the other across borders of trade and conquest? Scholars point to fragments, translations, scribbled records, but the shards refuse to confess. The jar in front of you just gives a soft plop, leaving the question unanswered. The air smells faintly of wet earth. You lean over the jar, watching ripples chase each other across the surface every time a drop falls. Your breath fogs the rim, and you're reminded that even something as small as a sigh can tip the balance. The keeper steadies the cloth draped across the opening, protecting the water from the night's dry wind. It's a small act, but it feels ceremonial, like tucking in a child. A light joke crosses your mind, If modern baristas worked like this keeper, they'd adjust your coffee shot with a nail scratch and a muttered prayer. Another, picture a startup selling smart fengens, clay bowls with artisanal holes guaranteed to sync your meditation hour. And a third, imagine the poor apprentice who sneezed too close to the jar, blamed for time moving too fast. The basin below fills, water glinting faintly in the starlight. You hear the drip and the hiss working together, weaving a lullaby. And as you watch the bowl sink for the 12th time, you realize the arithmetic isn't harsh. It's patient, like a friend tapping your shoulder gently, reminding you of the hour without scolding. Time isn't barking at you, it's nodding, waiting, kind. When the keeper finally closes the channel, silence returns. The basin shines like a small mirror, stars trembling across its surface. You feel a strange satisfaction as though you too have been calibrated, breath, heartbeat, and thoughts sliding into the rhythm of water. The bowl sighs below the surface, the jar stands steady, and you find yourself ready to follow this drip deeper into history. The courtyard holds its breath, and then the night reminds you who's in charge. A sly draft curls around the jar's lip, testing the calm you and the keeper just earned in Section 3. Heat presses from one side, the plateaus cool from the other, and the water between them tries to decide which mood to wear. You lean in and watch the meniscus quiver, nervous as a cat on a sill. The bowl wants to behave. The climate wants the last word. The keeper has negotiated this argument his whole life. By day, the Persian sun turns streets into hot copper, thinning the water so the drip gets cheeky and rushes ahead. By night, the air relaxes, the water fattens slightly, and the bowl sulks along as if weighed down by a shawl. He answers with the oldest remedy: shade. He lowers the jar into a shallow stone-lined pit so the earth cradles it. Overhead, a woven reed mat throws a quiet lattice of shadow across the surface, and the restless shimmer settles. It isn't magic, it's temperature, lowered just enough that the drop remembers its manners. You steady your own breath, and your exhale stops nudging the hour. A mainstream historical fact rests here like a palm on cool clay. Across Iran and the broader Persianate world, people mastered evaporative cooling. Courtyard basins, porous jars, subterranean rooms called sardab, and in later centuries, wind catchers, badger, to soothe hot air and keep water steady. The same logic that kept sherbets pleasant and cellars kind also kept clepsydras honest. Air moving across a damp surface steals a little heat. What remains behaves better. You feel it in the skin of the jar, velvety with condensation and in the way the float stops second-guessing itself. But heat never quarrels alone. Wind minds everyone's business. A twitch of breeze can tilt the bowl just enough to make an hour lopsided. So the keeper builds a crescent windbreak of mud bricks not high enough to trap warm air, just broad enough to tuck the jar out of the gusts. He smooths the top with his palm like a baker tidying a loaf and grins at the bowl the way a parent tucks in a fussy child. Beyond the wall, a gust shouldered from the alley rattles a shutter. In here, the surface holds its nerve. Water tattles on minerals, too. A harsh well leaves lime around the pinhole, a tightening ring if you ignore it. A sweet spring flows a touch too eagerly, turning an hour into just a minute. The keeper keeps 2 amphorae, a Brynjar jug for stew and a gentler one for clocks. He swirls, lifts a ladle to lamplight, and judges by eye with a precision that would make a chemist sigh and secretly applaud. The bowl approves. Its descent finds a rhythm that sounds like yes. For all the physics, the tools stay homely. At noon, he drapes a damp cloth over the jar so the breeze that slips through the arch becomes a tiny servant, carrying heat away. After dusk, he lifts the cloth so starlight can cool the surface directly. He sprinkles a little water onto the bricks around the base so the floor exhales kindness. You picture your box fan at home smiling in solidarity. Different century, same principle. A quirky tidbit tiptoes in with the dust motes. Some caretakers swore by double jars, nesting a porous outer sleeve around the working vessel and keeping the outer skin wet so the inner world stayed temperate. Others hung date palm fronds on the windward side, not only for shade, but because they believed the fronds taught the air to move politely. Part physics, part poetry, and the bowl doesn't seem to mind either way. Historians still argue whether formal timekeepers operated in purpose-built cool rooms beside temples and councils as early as the Achaemenid period, or whether that tidy integration of Sardab and Bajir blossomed mainly under later Islamic urban design. The sources flirt, then look away. You consult the jar for an opinion and receive the most diplomatic answer in world history. Plop. Midday lives in the clay, too. Heat swells the jar's throat. Cold makes it shy. The keeper taps the neck and listens for a change in note. If summer has stretched the passage, he lowers the water level a finger's width to calm the pressure at the outlet. If winter has tightened it, he warms the reservoir with his hands before the first sink. It's a duet. Material and season humming toward agreement. You find your breath falling into the same measured key. He shows you a child's trick with a grown-up purpose. He drops 3 flower petals onto the surface. When the air is still, the petals idle in place. When a secret draft sneaks past, they skate toward the leeward wall, tattling on currents your eyes can't see. He nudges the windbreak, the petals behave, and the hour forgives the courtyard its hobbies. If the petals lend a whisper of scent to the night, that feels like a feature, not a bug. Joke number 1 pads in on soft pause. The keeper claims he can forecast the day's drip by how quickly his morning tea cools. It's a 2-bowl breeze today. Joke number 2 peeks over the wall. Imagine a desert weather report. Highs near scorching, lows near sweater. Please keep your bowls in the shade. Joke number 3 arrives with a smirk. If smart homes used fenjans, they would pester you. Your drips are irregular, enable calm mode. Even the ground does its part. The courtyard floor isn't truly flat. It bows almost imperceptibly toward a drain, so stray, Splash wanders away from the stand. The keeper has learned where reflected lamplight won't dazzle a watcher into misreading a level. He dusts a faint chalk path across the tiles, his route at every sink change, so he can move in the dark without brushing the stand with a robe hem. You try the path once, heel to toe, and find it oddly soothing, as if your feet also want to calibrate. Behind the little labors sits a quieter art, seasonal corrections, thumbed and smudged on a tablet of notes. At solstice, subtract a whisper. At equinox, add one. The adjustments aren't doctrine, they're affection, the way a gardener knows which tree sulks in wind and which thrives on it. Historians still argue whether any uniform tables circulated widely or whether families of keepers kept their own local recipes for obedient hours. Later manuscripts hint both ways. Your keeper simply smiles and keeps counting. Remember the potter's wheel promising symmetry? Climate answers with its own rhythm, morning cool, noon blaze, evening ease. The keeper schedules long watches for the calm hours and chores for the fussy ones. Lamps trimmed at the first sink after dusk, petitions heard at the second, ovens stoked at the third. The day's shape presses into the clay like a handprint you can't see but somehow feel. There is, inevitably, a brief interlude with insects. Moths orbit the lamp and test the water with comically tiny feet, disturbing the needle as if asking for the time. The keeper settles a lattice of reeds over the mouth, fine enough to discourage curious wings, open enough for the air to keep doing its gentle work. He taps the lattice with one finger, an usher asking the audience to hush, and the moths go find a different show. Heat, wind, mineral, insect, shadow. Each wants a vote, and the keeper lets them speak before asking for quiet. You find yourself relaxing into the same civility. Here, time isn't a tyrant in a brass tower. It's a town meeting chaired by a patient person with a good broom. When the bowl finally glides under with that soft, contented sigh, the hour feels earned by collaboration, not coerced by clocks. You step back, and the night brushes your face. Somewhere to the southeast, the long winds of Esistan begin their summer sermon. The notorious 120-day winds that teach doors to complain and people to tie things down. Here, behind a simple wall and a thoughtful cloth, the jar barely notices. The petals don't drift. The cloth breathes. The drip takes its time. No more, no less. Exactly as a sleepy heart wants. You think of your own weather, busy days that overheat your schedule, chilly doubts that slow your steps, news gusts that shove you sideways, and you pocket the keeper's method. Shade what runs hot, open what cools, set small walls where the wind meddles, and carry on. The bowl doesn't hurry, the hour doesn't brag. Overhead, the stars keep their golden counsel, and you, very gently, keep pace with water. You settle into the keeper's rhythm so completely that the next lesson arrives like gossip shared over tea. Not every hour behaves, he says, and not every bowl wishes to be reasonable. When stubbornness creeps in, you don't shout at time. You coax it with tiny, old-fingered tricks. The sort of fixes that never make grand inscriptions but travel well on the breeze between courtyards. You kneel closer, and the jar's lip cools your forearms. The pinhole glints like a starling's eye. It looks innocent. It is not. First, the softest tool, beeswax. The keeper warms a scrap between his thumb and forefinger until it yields like butter, then strokes the pinhole with a thread so thin you hardly see it. He lets it cool, then, very gently, re-pierces the channel with a fine awl, polishing the throat the way a luthier smooths a fret. The goal is not a bigger hole or a smaller one, but a better-behaved one. Edges that don't snag, glaze that doesn't sulk. He holds the bowl to the light, turns it, and nods to himself. You can almost hear the clay purr. Now for the whisper you already heard in the wind of Section 4. A film of oil on the reservoir's surface. Not a stew, not a puddle, just a breath-thin veil that quiets evaporation, softens the water's skittishness, and discourages insects who think every basin is a holiday. He touches a reed to sesame oil, draws a circle on the water like writing a charm, and the gleam settles into a skin you wouldn't notice unless someone taught you how to look. The drip resumes its unhurried counting, as if soothed by a lullaby only liquids hear. The mainstream historical fact. Later Persian and Arabic manuals on practical arts and timekeeping describe small household measures. Oils to tame surfaces, wax to seal hairline mischief, cloth shades to calm drafts, that kept water clocks honest in prayer rooms, observatories, and irrigation councils. The grand clocks of princes get the poetry, but it's the humble fixes that kept markets on schedule and lamps trimmed at the right sink. You feel a quiet respect rising in you for the unglamorous layer of care under every measured hour. Of course, when patience fails and grit wins, the keeper calls in the tiniest plumber ever hired, a single grain of barley. He places it on his palm, a seed the color of toasted straw, and nudges it with a damp fingertip into the pinhole. A soft twist, a breath, a flick back out, and the channel clears with a shy hiccup. Laurie says barley has the right arrogance, firm enough to dislodge silt, soft enough not to bruise the clay. You grin at the idea of seeds moonlighting as tools. Somewhere a field nods in approval. A quirky tidbit floats up. Some keepers carried a little leather pouch on a thong around the neck, filled with clock herbs, a pinch of mint to freshen the reservoir, a shaving of myrrh when they wanted the prayers scented, a sprig of rue to keep flies respectful. Science rolls its eyes. The bowl seems to enjoy the attention. Another tidbit. A few families kept a lucky thorn, a particular desert spine passed down for generations, always used to pierce pinholes for household bowls. If the hour misbehaved, the thorn got a scolding and a place of honor anyway. Humans are very good at loving the tools that love them back. Historians still argue whether these barley and beeswax tricks were widely practiced or mostly appear in later copyist embellishments, and whether the oil film was common in the Achaemenid heartland or blossomed with medieval household science. Manuscripts, like water, pick up flavors from every jar they pass through. Some scholars swear by continuity, others point to innovation layered atop older habits. Your keeper dodges the debate with a practical shrug and shows you where he hides his barley pouch. He invites you to listen for trouble. A narrow, whining drip means the hole is pinched or filmed with mineral. A fat, impatient plop means too much head pressure or warm water putting on airs. A stuttering rhythm is bubbles flirting with the channel, usually the fault of soap or an overeager cousin who rinsed the jar and forgot to apologize. The fixes are domestic: a rinse with a dash of vinegar, a smooth with the waxed awl, a stern look at the cousin. You can't help smiling. Timekeeping, it turns out, is mostly housekeeping with a noble accent. He opens a small wooden box and shows you a kit so tiny you expect to see a mouse supervisor. A reed bristle brush bound with thread, a sliver of pumice for rim nicks, a beeswax tablet, a narrow linen strip for wicking the last drop from a stubborn seam, a bundle of dried petals for the draft test you liked earlier. Each tool is clean, humble, ready. The box smells like order. He says little, but the message stands up straight. Accuracy is the child of attention. You remember the potter's wheel and feel the logic continue. First shape, then polish, then care. The potter's symmetry gives you a chance at fairness. The keeper's fixes keep fairness from fraying at the edges. You wonder how many hours of your own day could be rescued with a beeswax thread and a barley seed if only life admitted such tools. Joke number 1 wanders in. Warranty void if waxed by amateurs, the keeper deadpans, and you both snort softly. Joke number 2 follows, smelling faintly of sesame. Please do not season your clock, he says, lifting the oil with priestly gravity. Joke number 3 trips over a moth. Barley Guild rules. 1 seed per blockage, overtime billed in crumbs. The moth, unlicensed, ignores the invoice. The fixes extend to etiquette. No sleeves near the jar. No sudden laughs aimed directly at the surface. No leaving the awl where a distracted aunt might use it to spear olives. Children learn this code the way they learn to balance a cup on a saucer. It becomes muscle memory, the graceful choreography of living around a device that is both fragile and vital. You breathe softer without being told. The hour thanks you. The keeper admits a secret. Sometimes he names bowls. Not after kings, never after saints. Those names demand too much theater, but after weathers and moods. Little Breeze behaved for 3 summers and then retired to rose petals. Steady Back ran the night vigils when his eyes were young. Hasty Hands lived briefly and is not discussed. Naming isn't sorcery, he insists. It's gratitude tattooed into speech. You repeat the names and feel how they lighten the work. Another mainstream anchor slips into place. In some towns, the official water division at the Connaught Mouth used Fen John sinks recorded publicly by the MIR AB watermaster, whose credibility stood or fell with the obedience of a bowl. Such offices produced habits that leak into households, little codes of cleaning, testing, agreeing on signs, until everyone can tell an honest sink from a fussy one. It's not just a clock, it's a culture. But there are limits, and the keeper respects them. No amount of beeswax will argue with a cracked rim. No barley grain will persuade a warped glaze. He sets flawed bowls aside without drama, letting them retire as fruit dishes, lamp saucers, or flower baths. Tools deserve second lives. Time agrees. It merely moves house. Historians still argue whether formulas for hole size to bowl volume existed as tables in antiquity, or whether rules of thumb ruled, as wide as a hair, as long as a breath. That sort of poetry pretending to be math. You like the poetry and suspect it often lands close enough to truth. The keeper winks as if to say, your breath is a better teacher than your ruler after sunset. The drip steadies. The wax finishing and barley clearing and oil veiling add up to something plain. Kindness. You feel it in your shoulders. The way care accumulates like small coins dropped in a jar. The jar thanks you by not making a fuss. The bowl thanks you by sinking without theater. The hour thanks you by arriving on time and leaving softly. Before you rise, the keeper presses the barley pouch into your hand, just for a moment. You feel the tiny seeds shift like a polite crowd. If hours can be tended with a single grain, maybe days can too. A little polish here, a little film of patience there, a careful clearing when silt gathers. You give the pouch back, a little reluctant, and he laughs under his breath as if he knows you'll make your own version. The bowl takes its gentle breath, sighs, and goes under. Obedient now, not cowed. You listen to the water settle, to the moths quiet, to your own heart shuffle a step closer to the jar's tempo. The fixes were small, their effect is large. You leave the courtyard with beeswax on your fingertips and the idea that care is the shortest path between a fussy world and a steady one. Somewhere beyond the wall, the night keeps arguing with itself, heat with cool, breeze with stillness. But inside you, the hour has decided. You return to the shelf where the bowls line up like quiet personalities, each one pretending to be identical while secretly believing it's special. The keeper slides a tray toward you. "Meet the family," he murmurs, and you realize this lesson isn't about water at all. It's about character. Thick-skinned, thin-skinned, flashy, shy. You pick up the first fenjon and feel its weight sit in your palm with the authority of a paperweight. The wall is melon-rind thick, its curve generous, its center of gravity low. When it floats, it rides steady even if a breeze peeks around the windbreak. Stubborn in the face of ripples, immune to drama. It takes longer to fill, yes, but it promises not to wobble into panic at the first tickle of air. Next, you try a feather bowl, so light it makes your fingers doubt. The wall is fine, almost translucent where the fire kissed it best. On the water, it responds like a skiff. The slightest draft makes it murmur against the surface. The sink is quicker, the sensitivity higher, the courage somewhat performative. The keeper laughs in his throat. Good for short measures, bad for boastful rooms. You watch it quiver and think of friends who are brilliant but need the gossip turned down. The mainstream historical fact tucks itself among these personalities. Persian ceramic traditions produced a wide vocabulary of forms and finishes. Burnished red wares, black slip interiors, pale glazes, and incised or dotted rims. So it was natural for timekeeping bowls to borrow those skills. A burnished interior helps water shed cleanly. A dark slip makes the first film of water more visible in moonlight. A pale, glossy glaze reflects lamplight so a watcher can see the meniscus creep. What looks decorative nearly always moonlights as function. You line up a trio for comparison. One is black slipped inside, its surface swallowing reflection so you can watch the first creeping trickle like ink writing on stone. Another is pale and reflective. It throws a soft halo in lamplight and makes the shrinking shine easy to judge. The third is unglazed but burnished, matte like satin, warm under your thumb. The keeper shrugs the way masters do when options are all good. Night likes dark, lamps like light, hands like smooth. Choose your weather, choose your bowl. He turns a heavy one upside down so you can see a ring of painted dots just inside the rim, tiny freckles of umber and red. Increments, he says. A nudge, not a promise. Every few dots, the bowl should ride a hair lower as it fills, so the watcher can guess whether the hour is behaving or plotting a prank. On another bowl, the dots march outside along the rim where a glance can see them without leaning over. A third carries scratched petal marks, as if time were blossoming toward its sink. You feel the quiet pleasure of a device that lets you see its thinking. A quirky tidbit arrives with a grin. Some households painted tiny fish or cat faces in the bottom, so children would sit still until the fish swam or the cat's whiskers drowned. It became a bedtime trick and, inconveniently for parents, a bedtime science lesson, small observers discovering that cooler water delays the cat's nap. In a few houses, someone tied a bead to the underside of the bowl on a fine flax thread. When the bowl finally dipped, the bead clicked a little shell on the jar's floor. A private, polite ding. You imagine a competition for the daintiest hour bell and award the prize to that shell. You test shapes. A hemispherical fenjon snuggles onto the surface like a moon slice, its volume predictable, its sink agreeable. A shallower, saucer-like form starts quickly but finishes in a sulk, as if arriving too early and then protesting the wait. A deeper, almost conical piece holds dignity to the last, then tips decisively, no nonsense. The keeper notes that the same pinhole doesn't behave the same in every geometry. You nod at the reminder that fairness loves context. Historians still argue whether any standard capacities or official patterns circulated widely. Did councils or temples issue bowl specifications? Or did families and guilds shape their own local idioms? Surviving texts hint at rules of thumb. As wide as a hair, as deep as a thumb, but not everyone's hair or thumb agrees. The debate hums on like a low drum in scholarship. Your jar, as usual, offers only a plop for comment.